Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Lyoko Retrospectives, and today we're going to be discussing episode 66 of Code Lyoko / the first episode of season 4, William Returns. Now, to kind of go off of what happened at the end of the last season, XANA won. Like, big time. The group, realizing that they were being stretched too thin and with the majority of Lyoko destroyed, decided that they needed to get some extra help. So they went to William, who had, as we have established throughout the series, has been just slowly but surely kind of gaining a presence and being developed. They finally decide to let him in. They finally tell him the whole deal with Lyoko and how he helped them before, and he says, "Sure, I'll help out." So they let him join the group. However, XANA ends up launching an attack on the core of Lyoko, and everyone else, for one reason or another, was being caught up with something. So the only people that could go in were Aelita and William. Unfortunately, William got separated from Aelita, and he wound up getting attacked by a Scyphozoa that allowed XANA to possess him, and through William, XANA was able to lead a horde of creepers and destroy the core, thus essentially getting rid of Lyoko. But not all was lost, as while the group was sulking about this, Jeremy wound up getting an email directly from Franz Hopper. Now, we weren't told what was in the email, but this episode finally elaborates on it. It turns out that Franz Hopper sent Jeremy data on Lyoko. It's not a lot of data, but through it, Jeremy believes that Jeremy and Aelita believe that they can reconstruct Lyoko, which ever since they got that email, they've been at work doing, which is when this episode takes place. Apparently a week has passed since then, and Jeremy and Aelita's efforts, while bearing little fruit, has still bared something, as they've been able to successfully recreate Sector 5, since that holds the core of Lyoko. Unfortunately, they still don't have any of the other sectors, so for now, Sector 5 is all they've got. So they just gotta learn to deal with it. On top of that, there's still the problem what happened to William, as after the whole thing, because they know he was still inside of Lyoko when it was destroyed, and based on their dialogue, apparently without Lyoko, if Lyoko is destroyed and you're still inside it, then you just fall into the digital sea below, which I guess makes sense, because I think the implication is that the digital sea is like empty data that you can. It's like empty data. It's just there taking up space, but ultimately provides no use. It ultimately has no use. So they're just trying. As such, Jeremy and Aelita have not only been working on trying to recreate Lyoko, but finding William, since he's been stuck in there. Now, we, the audience, know that William is still alive, but probably not amicable with the group anymore. But the group does not. And unfortunately, they're still trying to find ways around it. Made even worse by the fact that well, actually, not made even worse. Essentially, after William disappeared, they had to give an excuse why he went, and so using voice modulation through the supercomputer, they called the principal and pretending to be William's dad. They said that he went on a tour. He went out of country. He went out of country for a trip or something, whatever. I don't know if it's family or school related. I don't know. I don't know. It could be school related because it's the principal. But bottom line, that was their way of getting around it. Though even they're wondering how everything will work. Everything will work out when William's actual parents show up and want to see their son. However, the group ends up having another problem, as while they're talking, Odd mentions Jim's movie career, specifically when he was in a disco movie. I forgot what it was called. I know they said it at some point throughout the episode, but I wasn't paying attention. And Sissy, who is eavesdropping, decides that she wants to use this to essentially just make it a new news sensation, as apparently Millie and Tamia, since the last episode, have been arguing and are kind of they're mad at each other. Because when they tried interviewing Jeremy, they were constantly at each other's throats, and to make matters worse, Jeremy ditched them, so now they're not only mad at each other, but Jeremy, so... As such, Sissy decides that she wants, after hearing the story, she pretty much forces them to get back together, and appoints herself the new editor-in-chief of their school newspaper, with the first story she's printing being that Jim was in that disco movie. Which ultimately ticks Jim off something fierce, because when Odd discovered the movie, he used it as blackmail material on Jim so that he wouldn't end up switching classes, and, well, now that it's been revealed, Jim is ready to give Odd hell. However, as the story is coming out, Sissy just kind of ambushes the group while they're discussing it and begins immediately grilling Yumi, saying, "Well, what's your relationship status with William?" Of course, the group is flustered because they don't know what to do, but as they're all being grilled about it, William shows up, apparently having survived Sector 5. And so the episode then cuts to sometime later, and the group apparently has been talking with William, and he claims that the last thing he remembers is going into Lyoko, fighting the monsters, and being attacked by the Schizozoa. After that, it's just a blank. The group kind of buys it in the moment because no towers have been activated, so he probably isn't possessed by XANA. But so for now, they're just happy that William's back, and for the most part, he seems to be acting like himself, like they say, because based on what we see later, apparently he went through a whole day just acting like William does and just kind of being amicable towards the group. Like they make a joke about him having to go to a math test, and he's like, "Oh, great, I gotta deal with that." He even sticks up for the group, gets him out of hairy situations, and just seems to be he seems to be okay. Well, again, since we the audience saw that little snippet at the end of the last season, we know that there's going to be something up, especially since in a later scene when Aelita's in her room, Sissy and Millie and Tamia ambush her wanting to get an interview, and when William comes to her rescue, the music seems a bit ominous and imposing. He ultimately manages to shoo Sissy and Co. out, but the instant they leave, he turns towards Aelita, and his eyes flash with the XANA symbol. Ultimately, Sissy, believing that there's something going on with William and Aelita, decides to go to Jeremy and wants to get his take on the matter, but the instant Jeremy hears that they're together, he makes up an excuse that William went to Aelita to get some study advice, and then he says he's got to go to the bathroom, at which point he goes to check in Aelita's room, and William and Aelita are gone. He managed to track them through their cell phones, and he discovers that they're both heading to the factory, which surprises Jeremy and wonders what they're doing. As such, Jeremy tries calling Yumi, Odd, and Ulrich, but unfortunately, he can only connect to Ulrich and Yumi, as Odd is pretty much just now getting revenge served upon him, as Jim is making him dance out one of the scenes from the movie, and he's not stopping until he gets it perfect. So, for a while, Odd's out of the count. And in the meantime, Jeremy tries going to the factory to try and head off William and Aelita, but he gets there too late, as before he arrives, William brings the unconscious Aelita, which I'm guessing, he knocked her out, to the factory, and he immediately institutes the virtualization program, causing him and Aelita to both virtualize in the middle of Sector 5, and also allows us to actually get a better look at William's new outfit, and I still think it looks awesome. It actually looks really damn cool. I like how it incorporates the XANA symbol into it. It's not just a symbol on his chest, it's just kind of spread out over the outfit. I like the black and red accents. I love the black parts of it, the red accents. And it's clear that being controlled by XANA also helps improve his actual abilities on Lyoko, because one, he can now use levitation powers, which he used to lift Aelita, and as we see later, he can summon his Buster Sword in black smoke, and I'm sorry, that's awesome. And apparently he also has this thing called Super Smoke. It's like Super Sprint, but he turns into a cloud of smoke and then just races away on the ground. It's really cool. I love it. So bottom line, he pretty much uses his powers to levitate Aelita, and as he tries to go into the middle of the sector. Thankfully, by that point, Jeremy and Ulrich arrive, and Jeremy virtualizes Ulrich into Sector 5. At that point, Aelita thankfully wakes up and manages to use one of her energy spears to knock William aside before making a run for it. And before William can pursue, Ulrich appears, but unfortunately, Ulrich escapes using the Super Smoke. William escapes using the Super Smoke, and Ulrich gets ambushed by a group of creepers. Essentially, as such, William eventually catches up to Aelita and knocks her out again before bringing her to the edge of the sector. But thankfully, Yumi arrives in time and helps Ulrich, allowing them to try and chase after William. Jeremy is able to track William to the edge of Sector 5, where he immediately calls a Manta, and once the Manta arrives, he and Aelita get on it, and they fly to the edge of the sector. Of course, when Ulrich and Yumi catch up, Jeremy's just kind of wondering what are they doing. Ulrich and Yumi ask what he's doing since Jeremy said that they were only able to recreate Sector 5. Even Jeremy's like, yeah, that's true. Only thing that's left out there is the Digital Sea. And it's at this point that they realizes that that's his plan. Whatever he wants to do, he wants to throw Aelita back into the Digital Sea, which, as we've seen before in season 1, being thrown to the Digital Sea means no coming back. You are stuck. So they, as such, Jeremy virtualizes in their vehicles and gives chase. And they give chase, but unfortunately, Ulrich gets devirtualized on the way out, leaving Yumi. They managed to get out of Sector 5 into the area where the desert sector was, which you're able to tell because of the lighting and so forth. But unfortunately, Yumi almost gets dropped in Digital Sea 2. But before she can make a splash, she gets devirtualized by Odd. It turns out that thankfully he was able to get away from Jim because after news of Jim's movie reached the rest of the school, some kids actually sought it out and they actually really liked it, so they actually went to Jim and wanted his autograph. In the distraction, Odd finally got a chance to pick up his phone, learn what was going on, and made a beeline to the factory where he was able to get virtualized in. As such, Odd manages to blast at the Manta and causes it to pretty much buck enough so that it throws Aelita off, and Odd manages to get her before she falls into the sea, and just as William tries giving chase, Odd devirtualizes the Manta. However, we now learn that with his new Buster Sword, he can now fly, because why not? And as such, without any more backup beyond his sword, I'm guessing because they're too far away, William instead flies away and goes back into the Digital Sea. Most likely because, as Jeremy puts it, he's now under Xana's control, and as such, the episode ends with them wondering why William wanted to throw Aelita into the Digital Sea, but not knowing what's going on, Jeremy says they can just chalk it up to being Xana's new plan. So they've got to stay on their toes, and now the group's kind of wondering what they're going to do for their next cover story for William, since he did walk onto campus, and it shows he's still around. So they've got to find ways around. So they're just trying to find ways around this, and then the episode ends with pretty much most of the student bodies sitting in on a concert as Jim dresses up like a disco character and does disco. So, yeah. Overall, thought it was a good episode. I think what I like too is that this episode. What I kind of like too is about this episode is just the kind of continuity is just kind of again just some basic setup, but it's actually some really good setup. The ending of last season was like a really big cliffhanger, but as you do with Lyoko, every time they get you to the point where you think, oh crap, what are we gonna do? They always still leave you with a little bit of hope and how they can progress. Again, season 1, Aelita is still technically stuck with Lyoko, but they now have a way of getting her out, so that's good. Season 2, Xana escaped Lyoko, but they still can fight him, so they're going to keep going. Season 3, Lyoko's destroyed, but there's a grain of hope with Franz Hopper. And thankfully, in the beginning of this season, they are at work Jeremy has shown that he's at work restoring Lyoko. It's still a slow process because they state that Franz Hopper managed to escape into the network. So he's still out there, but it makes sense why he'd only be able to get them a little bit at a time, since again Xana was the one keeping him captive in Lyoko. So odds are he would need to only grab as much data as he could before sending it to Jeremy. And again, it makes sense why he would have the data, since he's the one that created Carthage and Lyoko and yes, Xana. So thanks to him, they still have a means of dealing with. They're now able to still recreate Lyoko and fight Xana if they need to, which I like. I like that, and I do like that it's actually taking time to do, because I personally think that if they had just brought Lyoko all the way back from the get-go, it kind of would have mitigated the whole direness of the last season. Here, they still have Lyoko, and even if it's just one sector, that's still something they can use to fight against Xana. Thankful, and it makes it better too is that when they recreated Carthage, they clearly made some upgrades. As for starters, you don't have to do that whole key thing anymore, where they're in that one room that always has a gimmick, but if you don't hit the key, then you're locked out of the rest of Carthage. Here, that's just gone. They can freely explore it to their leisure now, which I'm okay with. I think that's actually a better thing. I think that's actually better. So, again, I also kind of like how the episode progresses too, because because as we saw at the end of the last season, William, after he was lost, was still clearly possessed by XANA. But clear as we saw with that brief snippet, and even in this episode, it's clearly more than just a simple possession now. Because before Xana pretty much possessed him the way he possessed the other Lyoko warriors, through the Schifozoa, and the way how you could tell he was possessed was because his eyes were the Xana symbols. And while William is in the real world, that's the typical Xana possession, but while he's in Lyoko, his entire form has changed, which shows that however Xana has taken over him this time, it's much deeper than a simple possession. Which they clearly showcase, because when William was in the real world, no towers were activated, and yet XANA was able to control him. I chalk this up to one of two methods, and there's plenty of evidence to support both of them in the episode, so I'm just going to lay them out. My first theory is that XANA messed with the devirtualization process. When we saw William get devirtualized, because we saw William get devirtualized in the episode. No one was around when it happened, but we clearly saw the computer activating. However, we saw it through Jeremy's computer terminal, and we saw when the devirtualization when the devirtualization process was going down, it was clearly a little bugged, so to speak. So you can make the argument that when XANA devirtualized William, he could have screwed with the code to maybe possibly have himself be a part of William's code. So that way, it's essentially written into William's DNA. That's why he'd be able to still possess him without having to activate a tower. And makes it better is, and some evidence to support that is William's new outfit. As they explained in XANA Awakens, each of the Lyoko Warriors' looks on Lyoko are based on their subconscious wants and desires. Basically, just kind of based their own images. Now, for the most part, which would explain William and his new disposition. When he first arrived in Lyoko, his look was based on his own look. But if XANA kind of wrote himself into the code, it would probably change William as well. For the most part, it would still be the same basic stuff William would probably want, but now XANA is kind of influenced and encoded into it, which is why, as a result of this, it just kind of changes everything. It just kind of would explain why his outfit's now completely changed, because XANA is now just an intrinsic part of him, not just a thing that's possessing him. It would explain why the XANA symbol is emblazoned on his outfit, even if it is upside down. Why his outfit's now black. Why his sword has the symbol emblazoned on it. Because, yeah, the Buster Sword has the symbol emblazoned on it now, and it's just kind of... I like how it looks. The hilt now looks like it's just kind of these tendrils ensnaring the blade, and the XANA insignia is emblazoned right in the center of the hilt. So I like that. That would actually explain that. So it could actually explain why it's like that. But another theory would be what I call the Digital C / Code Earth theory. They stated in the episode that after Lyoko was destroyed, since there was nothing there anymore in the supercomputer, that William fell into the Digital Sea. Now, we didn't see this, but I'm willing to buy that. Now, in Season 1, they established that when someone falls into the Digital Sea, they are stuck in Lyoko. It happened to Yumi, and pretty much the only way they could get Yumi out of the Digital Sea was by using Code Earth. Now, back then it wasn't called Code Earth, but it was still the same essential code. That was the only way they could free Yumi from Lyoko. Now, to be clear, for someone like Yumi, it would make sense why they would only need to use the code once, since she was not tied, since the only thing they had to do was just cut her off from Lyoko. Unlike with Aelita, who is still technically connected to Lyoko due to XANA stealing her memories of Earth, they only had to use it once. But in this case, for William, you could make the argument that since he fell in the Digital Sea while he was possessed by XANA, it not only intrinsically tied him to Lyoko, but could have easily tied him to XANA, in the same way that Aelita was, albeit this one's more personal. because he fell in the digital sea with Xana as a part of him, it allowed Xana to essentially become a part of his being. And that if they want to free, and in the same way that Aelita was tied to Lyoko in season 1, now William is tied to Xana. It would certainly explain more. It would continue to explain why his outfit has changed as much as he is, because he and Xana are now just a part of each other. And since William is an actual person, it can pretty much allow Xana his own avatar without needing to worry about possessing someone else. He has someone on standby, and this person is a complete Lyoko warrior with his own abilities, health points, and as we saw, he can come and go from Lyoko if he pleases. Of course, I'm guessing that it's why that Santa probably doesn't send him back to Earth now, because on Earth while he probably could have the abilities that people possessed by Xana would have, because as we saw when he was getting the virtualization program and ready, he was moving at super speed, like when people are glitching out when Xana possesses them. But on Lyoko, he's a full-fledged warrior. So you can make the argument that when he fell into the digital sea while he was still possessed by Xana at the end of the last season, it just tied him and Xana together, and the only way they can get him free is that they have to cut the connection, much like how they essentially creating a second Code Earth protocol. Albeit this one will have to be done differently because it has to expunge Xana from William. Since based on what we've seen here, I think that even if they manage to devirtualize him, it may not be. It may not actually work. Now, again, I could be talking out of my ass here, since as I said before, when he was being devirtualized, it looked like the code was a little buggy. So you can again make the argument because Xana was a part of him, so the code was trying to work that in. But again, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe all they have to do is just devirtualize him in Lyoko and he be free. Because as we've seen before, when Aelita was possessed, all they had to do was devirtualize her, and Xana was just thrown out. So maybe William can be So maybe while Xana can devirtualize William if he wants, if he's devirtualized by other means, then Xana is free. It would explain why he flew back in the digital sea, since at that point it has no harm to him. He's already intrinsically tied to Xana. So again, I think these are both valid theories. You could probably but either way, I think that it pretty much just means that Xana is not just simply possessed by. It means that. Sorry, I'm misspeaking again. It means that William is not just intrinsically tied. It's not. I'm stuttering. I apologize. William is not just possessed by Xana anymore. He's a part of Xana, and if they're tied together, and if the group wants to save William, they have to cut that connection. So I think that's really interesting. And again, as I said during the plot summary, I like seeing more. I actually really like seeing William's abilities on Lyoko. I like the new outfit. Definitely, I kind of like the whole dark theme it goes for it, since he's possessed by Xana now. But again, he still has that kick-ass Buster Sword, still tying into the fact that, of course, the form is still influenced by him somewhat, because again, that he had that Buster Sword when he went on Lyoko before. But now we actually see more of his abilities beyond that. Again, we saw him using that levitation power. Even we can see him fly now with the Buster Sword, and of course the Super Smoke. I think that's actually a really cool power, and I think if William had more knowledge of Lyoko when he went in, he probably could have been very formidable, because when he has those powers in Lyoko, he's a force to be reckoned with beyond just having the giant sword. Now, again, to be fair, these are probably all abilities that Xana gives him, because I don't see him having the black smoke and all these clearly evil powers while he's part of the group. But some of them are clearly just regular but some of them are clearly new abilities that a Lyoko warrior would have. Hell, when William used the super smoke, he said super smoke, the same way that Oryx says super sprint when he activates his powers, or triplicate, or whatever. It's clear that these are his standard abilities now. And I like that. I like seeing them in action. I kind of like just seeing William go for it. And again, it still feeds into my I wish that he could be a regular member of the group instead of being Xana's adversary. But again, they're still seeing him as Xana's little protege / puppet is still interesting, because we still see him using these abilities, and they're still really cool to see. again, I just wish that we could see him actively use them for, good at some point, though I doubt that's going to happen. Still really cool, and it also helps that the show does at least acknowledge that he's a Lyoko warrior, even if he is on the opposite side. Because in the new opening thing for season 4, when they're flashing through all the characters and how they're all tied together, it shows them in the real world doing their thing, and then it shows them on Lyoko. It's so in the new theme song, William's the first one you see. You see him just kind of in the group. I mean, just kind of looking happy-go-lucky or skulking a little. Then it flashes for him on Lyoko when he's in his dark form, leading the monsters and having the Buster Sword on standby. That's again, I like that they at least acknowledge that. I just wish that again they had him eventually become a good guy again. It just bugs me. That's all. Otherwise, yeah, it does feel like this is just in a way, this episode kind of feels like a breather. It's still kind of establishing thing. It still establishes what's happening now. We got the new situation with William being on Xana's side. We have the idea for the new plot, albeit in this case, the group doesn't know what Xana wants. It's a similar case with the Skiff. It was like a similar case in season 2 when Xana brought out the Skiff-Azoa. They knew he wanted Aelita's memory. They don't know why. They know, and it's the same thing here. They know that Xana wants Aelita thrown to Digital Sea. They just don't know why. So yeah, once again, that Aelita is pretty much at the center of all this. It's just at the center of all this, which it really sucks. But then again, it probably helps that she's Franz Hopper's daughter, and she probably has a lot of And when it comes to her and Lyoko, she's essentially she's the only one with admin privileges. I don't know. Bottom line, it must suck for her that she's got to deal with all this crap. But again, end of the day, I feel like another problem. But there is still some problems here and there. But they're minor at best, like the B plot with the whole newspaper thing. As usual, it's just resolved rather quickly. Millie and Tamia ultimately just tell Sissy to piss off, and they become friends again due to their mutual hatred of her. And again, the whole thing with Jim was clearly there just to help kind of distract Odd, though I will give credit. I do like that they actually acknowledge that again, kind of the same way that they brought Sam back at the end of the last episode, who again I almost had forgotten about till she came back in that episode. So I like that they are doing more callbacks to earlier episodes with this. Although I kind of would like to have seen some of the fallout between Ulrich and his dad, since Ulrich's dad came there, talked to him about his failing grades, and Ulrich pretty much told him to piss off, and as he ran off. I feel like there should be some fallout there. I wish that is another thing. I wish we had seen more of the fallout from what the group did, how they got out of their respective things. Or we could probably see more about Odd, talking about him and Sam's relationship now being a bit more strained, even more so than it was before, since Odd pretty much chose helping the group over being with Sam, which is understandable, but again, it would help that I feel like at this point she would be the one in the wrong, and she'd have to find a way to say I'm sorry, since she's the one that screwed it up. Or maybe in the case of Ulrich and his relationship with the school, maybe they talk with his dad after he stormed out, and now there's probably threat of Ulrich being held back again, or being possibly pulled out of school. Or what about with Yumi? Yumi and her parents now being strict because maybe her brother did tell on her after she ran away. That one, I feel like that all needs to be addressed. The only one they ever follow up with is Jeremy and how he ran out of the interview. But otherwise, the rest are just kind of left on the floor. There's nothing really acknowledging about it. Again, I do like that they have to address some continuity with Jim and his that disco movie he was a part of. But otherwise, there's no real follow up in the last one beyond the big stuff that happened on Lyoko and the stuff with Jeremy. Which, again, the big stuff makes sense that they would have to acknowledge that, since that's the core of the show. It's just that I wish that there was a little bit more in the continuity department. Otherwise, though, still a really good episode. Again, it helps that because we saw William being part of Xana's now looking more dark at the end of season 3. We know that there's something up with him being back here, so you're just kind of waiting for so there is some slight tension there, even as he's interacting, being amicable with the group. Which, again, if he is being controlled by Xana, it shows that Xana's probably gone to be as being a better actor. Though this again could feed back into the whole he's now intrinsically tied to Xana, so there is still some of him in there. It's just that Xana's kind of weeded his way into his mind, so there's still some level of influence there. So Again, I feel like that could easily be like, so again, that could possibly be the case. Like, it's something like William is still there, but it's mostly XANA. So I like that. I like them setting up the dynamic. I like seeing William be. I like that we get a taste of William as a Lyoko warrior working for XANA. So that's still, and again, thought that was fun. I love his outfit. I love his powers. So kudos there. Still think the Buster Sword's awesome, especially since now we can summon it. That needs to be a thing. The rest of them need to do that now. But again, we still get a taste of what the status quo is now going to be. Them, Jeremy and Aelita in this case, just slowly rebuilding Lyoko from the ground up, since they had only so much to work with, to the point where they only had Sector 5, which makes sense that would come back since that holds the core. But again, there's still the whole thing with XANA wanting to throw Aelita in Digital Sea, so you know that there's going to be something going on there, and you know that that's going to be expanded on later. But till then, this episode's just there to set out the building blocks, and it's really good at doing it. So, yeah, that's about it. Thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and we'll see you next week to see how the final season of Code Lyoko continues to develop. So, yeah, that's about it. Take care.